On the 22nd of July, 1945, in the Sea of Okhotsk, Commander Eugene B. Fluckey stood on the bridge of the USS Barb and studied the dark outline of the Japanese coastline. He was 32 years old. The war in the Pacific had entered its final violent stretch. American forces had taken Okinawa after nearly 3 months of sustained combat. Strategic bombing had already reduced much of Tokyo to ash. Yet the Japanese home island still functioned. Rail lines carried coal from Hokkaido's mines to steel works and ports. Coastal shipping hugged shorelines under cover of land-based aircraft. The Imperial Japanese Army still had divisions intact on the mainland. The Barb had orders to patrol aggressively along the northern coast of Japan, particularly off Karafuto and Hokkaido. It was her 12th war patrol. Under Fluckey's command, she had become one of the most aggressive submarines in the Pacific Fleet. But on this night, the mission would move beyond torpedoes. USS Barb was a Balao-class submarine, 311 feet 9 inches long, displacing roughly 1,526 tons surfaced. She carried 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 forward, 4 aft, and could carry 24 torpedoes in total. By 1945, she was also fitted with a 5-inch 25 caliber deck gun mounted forward of the conning tower, along with 40 mm and 20 mm anti-aircraft guns for surface engagements. Fluckey had taken command in April 1944. Under his leadership, Barb's patrols became increasingly bold. He had already penetrated heavily defended harbors, including a surface attack inside the anchorage at Namquan Harbor earlier that year, navigating through mined waters at night to torpedo ships at anchor. His aggressiveness was calculated, not reckless. He studied charts personally. He insisted on detailed reconnaissance through periscope and radar before every approach. By mid-1945, the Japanese merchant fleet was crippled. The U.S. submarine campaign had strangled maritime supply lines across the Pacific. Targets were scarcer. Coastal traffic moved at night and under air cover. Mines were laid heavily along approaches. Fluckey began looking for new ways to strike. Northern Japan, July 1945. On the 18th of July, Barb entered the Sea of Okhotsk through La Perouse Strait, between Hokkaido and Sakhalin. Few American submarines had operated there. The waters were shallow in places, poorly charted, and heavily mined. Soviet forces had not yet declared war on Japan. There were no friendly ports nearby. If Barb were damaged, there would be no rescue. Fluckey intended to attack shipping along the Karafuto coast. Over the next several days, Barb destroyed multiple small vessels using gunfire and torpedoes. Coastal freighters, patrol boats, and sampans fell victim to surprise surface attacks. The submarine often remained surfaced at night, using radar to locate targets and her deck gun to conserve torpedoes. On the 20th of July, after sinking several small ships near Shari and along the east coast of Sakhalin, Fluckey observed something new through binoculars, a railway line running close to the shoreline. It paralleled the coast for miles. Through the periscope, he could see telegraph poles marching along the track. Occasional structures appeared near sidings. Smoke from a distant locomotive marked movement inland. The railway connected coal mines to ports on the Sea of Okhotsk, coal-powered factories, steel production, and locomotives. Interrupting that line would strike at infrastructure, not merely shipping. Submarines did not attack railways. Fluckey began to consider it. On the evening of the 22nd of July, 1945, Barb surfaced approximately 5,000 yards offshore near the town of Kashiho, on the eastern coast of Karafuto. The sea was calm. Visibility was good under partial cloud cover. Japanese shore defenses in the area were believed to be light, but certainty was impossible. Fluckey called his officers into the control room. He outlined the plan. A landing party would go ashore in rubber boats, under cover of darkness. They would carry demolition charges, specifically a scuttling charge modified with a 55-pound explosive head and a micro-switch trigger. The device would be rigged directly to the rails. When a train passed over it, the weight would depress the switch and detonate the charge. The goal was not sabotage for its own sake. The objective was to destroy a moving train, demonstrating that American forces could strike the Japanese home islands directly. It was a calculated risk. The shoreline was enemy territory. If discovered, the landing party would have no support except Barb's guns, and the submarine would be exposed to shore batteries and aircraft once daylight came. Fluckey asked for volunteers. He received more than he needed. He selected 8 men: Lieutenant William Walker, the executive officer, Ensign William Hatfield, and 6 enlisted sailors trained in demolition and small boat handling. They were issued carbines, .45 pistols, wire cutters, and the modified charge. Time was critical. They would have perhaps 1 hour ashore. At 23 o'clock hours, Barb moved to within roughly 950 yards of shore. Engines were kept at minimal revolutions to reduce noise. Lookouts scanned for lights or movement along the beach. 2 rubber boats were lowered into the water. The landing party paddled quietly toward a narrow stretch of beach identified through periscope observation earlier in the day. The surf was light. The men dragged the boats beyond the waterline and concealed them in low brush. Ahead lay a shallow embankment and the railway line approximately 200 yards inland. The terrain consisted of scrub vegetation and scattered trees. There were no visible sentries, no dogs barked, no vehicles moved along the nearby road. The men advanced in single file, keeping low. At the rail line, they worked quickly. The charge was positioned beneath one rail. Wires were attached to the microswitch, which was secured so that the weight of a locomotive would trigger detonation. The mechanism was simple and mechanical. There were no timers. It would detonate only if a train passed. They completed the installation in approximately 12 minutes. Before withdrawing, they cut telegraph wires along the line to disrupt communications. Several poles were felled. Then they moved back toward the beach. At 23:45 hours, the landing party re-embarked and paddled toward the faint silhouette of Barb waiting offshore. The submarine's deck crew recovered the boats efficiently. Within minutes, Barb backed away from the coastline and submerged to periscope depth at a safe distance. Now they waited. At approximately 1:47 hours on the 23rd of July 1945, a lookout at the periscope reported a glow approaching from the south along the coastline. Through the scope, Fluckey observed the headlamp of a locomotive. It advanced steadily along the track. The engine pulled a string of freight cars, likely coal. The train reached the section of track where the charge had been placed. For a fraction of a second, nothing changed. Then a sharp flash erupted beneath the locomotive. The blast lifted the engine off the rails. Steam and debris shot into the night. Freight cars jackknifed and tumbled down the embankment. Through the periscope, the crew of Barb watched the wreck unfold in silence. There was no secondary explosion from ammunition. No immediate organized response. The train lay twisted along the shoreline, its locomotive overturned. The microswitch device had functioned precisely as intended. Fluckey ordered the periscope lowered. Barb withdrew submerged. Heading northeast into deeper waters, the mission had taken less than 3 hours from first approach to detonation. It was, and remains, the only known instance of U.S. ground forces conducting a demolition raid on the Japanese home islands during the war. The raid did not end Barb's patrol. Over the following days, Fluckey continued aggressive operations in the Sea of Okhotsk. Barb attacked coastal shipping with torpedoes and gunfire, sinking additional vessels near Esatoru and Shari. Japanese air patrols increased in frequency. Depth charge patterns were dropped in areas where radar contacts had been reported. On one occasion, Barb found herself in water barely deeper than her own length, limiting her ability to dive beneath incoming attacks. Sound operators tracked screws of patrol craft overhead. Depth charges detonated close enough to rattle gauges and dislodge minor fittings. Yet the submarine avoided serious damage. Fluckey's decision to operate in shallow northern waters carried inherent danger. Mines were the greater threat. Japanese defensive minefields were laid to protect coastal routes. Charts were incomplete. Sweeping operations by U.S. forces had never extended this far north. Barb relied on sonar and cautious navigation. At times, she proceeded at slow speed on the surface at night, trusting radar and lookouts. By early August 1945, her torpedo supply was nearly exhausted. The patrol had been one of the most productive in the submarine's history. By mid-1945, the U.S. submarine force had sunk over half of Japan's merchant tonnage. Oil from the Dutch East Indies no longer reached the home islands in significant quantity. Coal transport within Japan had become essential for maintaining industry and rail movement. The train destroyed by Barb's landing party represented more than a tactical success. It demonstrated vulnerability within the Japanese mainland itself. However, it did not materially alter the course of the war. On the 6th of August 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. On the 9th of August, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan the same day and invaded Manchuria. Japan announced its intention to surrender on the 15th of August 1945. Barb was still at sea when news arrived for his leadership during the 12th patrol. including the penetration of mined waters, destruction of shipping, and the shore demolition raid, Commander Eugene B. Fluckey was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation referenced extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry in action against the enemy. Several members of the landing party received commendations for their participation in the railway sabotage mission. USS Barb ended the war credited with the destruction of numerous ships totaling over 96,000 tons across her patrols. She remains one of the most successful U.S. submarines of the conflict. The train wreck along the Carafudo coast was not widely known at the time. It did not appear in headlines. It did not shift battle lines. But it marked a rare moment when a submarine crew stepped onto enemy soil and struck infrastructure directly, then vanished back beneath the sea. On a quiet stretch of track in northern Japan, in the early hours of the 23rd of July 1945, a locomotive rolled into darkness and did not emerge. The men of USS Barb returned to their stations below decks and continued the patrol. Within weeks, the war ended. The railway was repaired, the wreckage cleared, the coastline resumed its routine. But the record remains: a submarine operating far from support, 8 sailors crossing a beach in silence, a charge placed beneath steel rails. A single explosion witnessed through a periscope lens. It stands as a measured example of initiative within the constraints of total war, planned carefully, executed precisely, and grounded in the realities of terrain, distance, and risk. In remembering USS Barb and her crew, we remember not spectacle, but discipline, not exaggeration, but resolve. Their actions unfolded in darkness, recorded in patrol logs and after-action reports. Today, they endure in the documented history of a war fought across oceans and shorelines alike. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of World War II, the battles, the strategy, the heroes, and the hidden moments history almost forgot, then you're in the right place. This channel brings powerful, carefully researched World War II stories to life with immersive narration and authentic detail. So if you enjoyed deep dives into history's most defining conflict, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Join us as we uncover the stories that shaped the world.